Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while. I've been sick. I'm sorry if I sound a little bit shaky and a little bit croaky, but in today's video, I'm going to break down the last season of Kill Team releases. I'm also going to look at the upcoming releases for the rest of this season, what those releases can infer, and also what the declassification, the rotating out of some other teams, might mean for faction representation in the game. Basically, I'm going to be making some educated guesses on what we might get. Some of it will be wish listing, some of it will be sort of somewhat well informed, but in general, it will be a fairly in-depth analysis. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that you find it useful. If you do, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers. Before I start breaking down and analysing what's to come for Kill Team, I want to get your untainted thoughts, opinions and wish lists, if you could, in the comments below, on what kind of teams you would be excited to see, whether that's weird Imperial teams like the Sanctifiers or strange Xenos races that aren't represented in the game at all. Whatever your ideas or whatever you're excited about in terms of releases for Kill Team and generally the wider 40k sphere, please drop that in the comments section below. But now I'm going to begin with my own sort of breakdown and analysis of what is next for Kill Team and what classification might mean for the factions and miniature releases. So just to get everyone caught up and on the same page, let's just talk about what the classified rotation is itself. So declassification comes into effect as of November 2025, and that is removing a sizable chunk of the teams from the game, reducing the pool of teams that can be played at the most competitive events. Keep that in mind. Most tournament organisers are going to let you play with whatever teams you want to play with, and certainly if you bother to turn up to an event, I don't think most people, or I don't think anyone, would really turn you away. So let's break it down. We are set to lose 5 Imperial teams, 4 Chaos teams, 2 Elf teams, and 2 Xenos teams. I've kind of put the Elves in their own faction purely because of how distinct their niche is, playstyle within the game of Kill Team, rather than any kind of political law reasons, of putting them in with the wider Xenos cast. So before we begin, we have to look at the previous release format for the game. We have had the occasional random themed release, which would give us like Ashes of Faith, where the Inquisition were fighting Chaos cults. However, generally speaking, most of the releases have come through one of the various seasons of the game. So the Octarius season, which gave us individual kill zones. We got obviously the Octarius terrain, the Orc kill zone. We also got kill zones like Morok, which was that kind of Imperial Palace kind of vibe. Fronteris, which is kind of like a Wild West vibe, and so on. Basically, the gist of it was we got individual kill zones and individual teams in boxes. They were somewhat expensive, those boxes, because you couldn't just get the teams on their own unless you waited for a separate release. Then the Gallowdark season came, and we basically got into the dark with every single release. It was very expensive for everyone. Everyone was sick of the Gallowdark terrain by the end of it. However, I think it did do one good thing for the health of the game, and that is flood the market with this spaceship terrain that we all actually get a lot of use out of. However, it was very expensive and much bemoaned at the time. We then got the Beta Decima season, which changed tactics a little bit in that one. Only the first box came with terrain, and then after that, we just got smaller individual boxes of teams versus teams, sometimes with small expansion terrains. So sort of things like generators and stuff like that, like we could add on. But it was much less expensive box to box, and that was received fairly well as well. Then we got the Vulcus season, which is just the previous season just gone. And in that season, obviously, we got the big Hivestorm release box. And after that, we got themed terrain with teams. It was kind of a bit of a hybrid sort of system, really. We got teams and 2 teams in a box with either Vulcus expansions or add-ons and things like that for narrative terrain. And then finally, we are in the current season of the game, Tomb World. So again, this seems to be a hybrid format. But what all these formats have in common is generally they stick to 4 boxes over a season with 8 teams in. So 4 boxes, 2 teams in each. Whether or not they come with terrain is kind of up in the air based on previous Kill Team releases. So let's break down the current season that we're in before we start breaking down the factions. Here we can see a spread of the various releases that we've had already for Tomb World. So we've had the big Tomb World release drop with the flagship Deathwatch faction. That was obviously massively popular, especially with Space Marine 2 having some Deathwatch in it at the beginning as well. We've also had the Dead Silence release just drop. Now, this release has gone for that slimmed down box that just the team vs team, no terrain. Personally, I don't know if this is going to disappoint people or not, I think the rest of the releases for the Tomb World season will be like this. I don't think we're going to get much terrain at all because so much production time and so much production sort of margin will be going into the printing the starter box, basically injection molding the starter box for the wider 40k game. So if Dead Silence is anything to go by, which I think it is, we probably won't get much in terms of extra sprues. However, we are left with 2 more boxes for the Tomb World season. One of those boxes has already been released, and that is Shadowhunt, which is rumoured to have a dual terrain setup and rules for the Nightbringer. Now, this is kind of touted as a boss battle scenario, in the narrative version of the game. This could mean the box comes with a half sprue of each terrain and a Nightbringer. Does that sound likely? I don't think it sounds particularly likely to me. But the Tomb World season also should have, going by previous releases, another mystery box. What's in the box, guys? What's in the box? So this could be released before Shadowhunt. I think, anyway, purely because Shadowhunt's universal sort of selling point is as a boss battle with the Nightbringer. And why would you have that not at the end of the run of boxes, if you know what I mean? Surely running into a Shard of the Catan Nightbringer in the bottom of the Tomb World is going to be the final boss, isn't it? Unless we get like final boss Trazyn or something like that. But anyway, this mystery box I think will be released before Shadowhunt. But in today's video, we can start trying to talk about what factions might be in that box and what factions might be in the future season of Kill Team. So let's break down the factions. The Imperium retains the strongest representation, which is understandable, obviously. As a faction, it's the largest umbrella and is standalone the most popular. What I mean by this is the Phobos Strike Team and Black Fang's Ghost Pack essentially fill the same niche, both in terms of aesthetics and gameplay. The Novitiates, again, kind of maybe not an apples to apples comparison, but the Novitiates definitely fill the niche for the Sisters of Battle. The Hunter Clade and the Battle Clade, again, kind of analogous in terms of being representation for the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Inquisitorial Agents also allow niche sub-factions a fair bit of representation in the game in a kind of very limited way. So obviously you can get Sisters of Silence, you can get Kazakin and stuff like that. Obviously this leaves us with a few gaps. We've got the Custodes and the Grey Knights. Now, personally, I would like to see the Custodes represented by something called the Eyes of the Emperor. I'll talk about this later, but it's basically like a custodian that's handed in his badge and retired. And obviously, if teams like the Deathwatch can be represented and realised fully in the game, then so can the Grey Knights. I'd like to see like a Paladin kit sort of warp shunting around the board and stuff like that. Maybe bring some Mandrake rules into play and some Psyker stuff. Final thoughts on the Imperium sub-faction, though, is the release of Black Fang's Ghost Pack, which is a Space Wolf specific, Phobos specific, sort of very niche of a niche unit release for Kill Team, does show a willingness to niche down heavily for Kill Team, which is interesting. I mean, what if the White Scars or or the Dark Angels or even all the wider Imperial factions got this kind of treatment? It would be very interesting for the game, I think. So moving on, we've got Chaos. Chaos representation will drop significantly with the loss of Legionaries, War Coven, Blooded, and Galapox. However, some of these teams do have analogues. So the Legionaries and the War Coven kind of have analogues. So the Legionaries already arguably shared a niche with Nemclaw. They're both Legionaries running around on the board doing mean chaos stuff, just power armored bodies with specific chaos rules. The Warp Coven, to a lesser extent, could share a gameplay niche with the Murder Wing. It depends how heavily they lead into that Chaos Lord and they lead into the elite sort of level of the Raptors. However, obviously they don't have the flexibility of the Warp Coven and the Thousand Sun specific aesthetics and representation. Finally, the Blood and the Galapox, though, definitely don't really have analogues, and certainly I think with the Blooded and the Death Corps of Krieg not having an analogy, the Horde niche is kind of thin on the ground now in Kill Team. So I do wonder if we're going to get, that niche re-looked at and reinvigorated in some way through Chaos or through another faction. This also does leave us a kind of a void for, the big four in terms of Chaos. Emperor's Children are certainly lacking when it comes to their cult element. So obviously in Kill Team and 40k, the World Eaters get the Jackals, the Thousand Suns, they get their their Zangors, the Death Guard will get the Plague Zombies. So obviously I think a fair bet might be for the Emperor's Children to get their Chaos contingent in some way. However, that might step on the toes of Chaos Cult a little bit with the thing Abomination vibe, maybe. So that's Chaos kind of talked about in terms of representation. So the Good Elf team's representation drops significantly with the loss of both Void Dancer Troop and Corsair Void Guard. Obviously, they're kind of neutral elves, so to speak. But the only good elves that we're going to be left with are the Blades of Cain. And they're a very weirdly formatted team. You can't just buy a Blades of Cain Kill Team box. You'd have to go and buy all your individual boxes and Frankenstein them together in a Kill Team. This isn't a buyer-friendly experience. It isn't really a Kill Team product, if you think about it. So this lends a lot of weight to the rumours circulating around Eldar Exodites. Certainly think with only having two elf teams on the board at play, and one of those two elf teams being a weird Frankenstein team, and the other team being an older upgrade sprue, I definitely think the Eldar will be due a bit of love, and I definitely think the Exodites will fill that niche, I suppose, fairly well. If the Ghost Pack's anything to go by, maybe we'll get some pet dinosaurs or something. But another interesting point is in the wider 40k sphere, I think the Dark Eldar are due a little bit of love, and it will be interesting to see how that model or that range refresh goes, whether the Homunculus Covens might get a bit of love, and whether they'll get any interesting design space to fill in Kill Team with that kind of range refresh. The miscellaneous Xenos teams are probably the most underrepresented now, except for the Tau, weirdly, which have a good selection of troops from each sort of sub-faction in their army. They've got the Kroot, they've got the Tau stealth suits, and they've got the Vespids, whereas every other faction kind of has low overall representation across the board. Each of the declassified teams does, again, seem to have some sort of an analog, though. So, obviously, the Pathfinders are being replaced with the Dark Star team. You could argue the Dark Stars are an elite variant of that same gameplay niche, I suppose. The Commandos are, again, analogous to the Wrecker Crew. The Orc contingent is kind of being serviced. However, I would say the playstyle is totally different. And then the Wormblade and the Brood Brothers are pretty much one-for-one analogous teams in terms of one another. I could see the big Orc refresh bringing us a new Orc team, though, for sure. They're going to be the big bad in 40k, which gives a lot of resources and time spent on models and stuff like that. So maybe we'll get the the Horde niche filled by a Grot team or something like that. That would be interesting. Again, the Gene Stealer cult need a non-character release desperately. So I think if they were going to get a multi-part plastic kit, like the Lees of Votann get all their like multi-part releases, it'd be nice to see maybe if we got a Brood Brother single box unit. It'd be nice to see that turn up in Kill Team. Do you know what I mean? So what are my sort of overall findings? I think at the moment the most likely box will be Extradites vs somebody. So let's be honest, Valrak's rumours aren't usually off the mark, and this has been a recurring and consistent one for a little while now. Given that the Blades Kane aren't a one-box team, Mandrakes are obviously very dark Eldar coded, it feels like the Extradites are the most likely to drop. However, maybe they could save them and tie them into the next kill zone. So obviously we've been getting a new kill zone at the start of each season. Maybe we could get an Eldar Crone World. I believe that's what they were called. Yeah, maybe we could get like an Eldar Crone World with the Extradites defending that planet in the release of the next season. Let's speculate though on what the opposing teams might be. Personally, I would love some Kachan Devils fighting Extradites in the jungle on an Eldar Crone World. Do you know what I mean? Like wraithbone structures sticking out of the jungle with like dense foliage that maybe causes obscuring, a little bit like the mist in Beta Decimer, but in patches. Something like that might be really interesting. So let's talk about what other factions might turn up in the game. So some interesting points raised by the release of the Ghost Pack, which is a very, very niche Space Wolf unit, is that we might get the same thing for other legions, other chapters, and even other armies in the game. Given the current deluge of Ultramarine figures with Titus and Marneus Calgar and stuff like that, I would find it hilarious if we finally got the return of the Tyrannic War Veterans. And we kind of got a nod to that in the Leviathan box set, with the Phobos guy with his chitin armor and his Tyranid hunting Bowie knives and stuff like that. So it'd be cool to see that realised on a larger kit. But I don't think that's really on the cards, is it? Because we've got the Death Watch on alien hunting duties at the moment. Other chapters, though, specifically would be interesting. Maybe we could get like the Unforgiven or foot-based Raven Wing, for the Dark Angels. Might be interesting to see a couple more chapter-specific releases for them, considering they've got their own Primarch on the scene now. Maybe more niche chapters as well, like the White Scars or the Raven Wing. We could get units to match, their interesting HQs. Like obviously you got Subodan Khan, and you got like the Raven Wing guy that looks like the Crow. Give us a kill team of the Crow Raven Wing units, dude. Like, come on. Obviously as well, the Grey Knights still have no representation in the game, and low-hanging fruit there might be Grey Knight Paladins. Just have like Space Marines with Mandrake rules or something like that. This would translate really well to Chaos coded stuff as well. We've just had a Christmas announcement for the Red Corsairs, and it'd be interesting to see if they got their own sort of love as a faction in Kill Team, or maybe even the Iron Warriors. We've also got rumors of an upgrade sprue for the Iron Warriors, and these would be really interesting opposition to the Exodites as well. Think like industry versus nature, that sort of thing. Like the Hobbits versus the Orcs in Lord of the Rings. And again, we could even get like the Emperor's Children cultists on a hunt for Eldar souls, trying to corrupt the Chrome World, something like that. They would all be really, really interesting picks for fighting the Exodites. However, I do think they're sort of rather unlikely, as we know we're going to get Raptors against the Sisters with the Shadow Hunt box. And Chaos doesn't tend to get the same number of releases and love as the Imperium do, you know what I mean? These do seem unlikely though, really, because we know we're going to get Raptors fighting the Sisters in the leaked Shadow Hunt box, and Chaos tends not to get as much love as the wider Imperium faction. So Xenos teams are sort of wide open in terms of releases, I think, at the moment. Orcs are rumoured for the next big range refresh. This could mean a lot of the base units get sort of updated, so boys, Gretchen, stuff like that. And both could be a good candidate for a Kill Team box. I think it's high time we finally got a good war mechanic in the game. And this could be possible, if we've got a multi-part boys kit with like a Kill Team upgrade sprue, we could we could see the commando niche of a 10-man. We could really see that like 10-man tough body orc niche be filled again with a multi-part boys kit. And another thing as well is a wide Gretchen team could be a laugh. Imagine like 14-man team, all with multi-activations with like ploys that let you really make use and leverage those multiple activations. That could be interesting. They kind of managed it with Rattlings, didn't they? So maybe like a Gretchen team with a run third or two kind of bolstering the ranks could be interesting. Finally, I think the Tyranid Warriors Strike dual kit seems more likely than ever, because we've got another Tyranid Prime release, which is an on foot walking Tyranid Prime. We've got two of those models without a sort of an equally modern sculpt, an equally modern warrior kit for them to lead on the tabletop. So maybe that's a possible release as well. Looking forward to the future. So closing thoughts: Exodites are coming. It's hard to discern who will accompany them though. The Horde niche hasn't had any love in quite some time in Kill Team, and it'll be interesting to see whether they revisit that niche at all, with modern sort of rules and stuff like that, or whether they kind of keep the direction of the game going into a more elite ecosystem. We might get a new kill zone, unless they come up with some abstract lore reason that Exodites are fighting a random kill team in a Toon world, maybe. But I think it's possible that we might get Exodites in the new season, and we might get that fabled jungle terrain, or maybe some Eldar coded terrain, something like that. Custodies and Grey Knights still have zero representation. Grey Knights are rumoured for a range refresh in the new edition, but Custodies seem like they will need some sort of bespoke unit to sort of make that power fantasy work. The best thing I can think of is the Eyes of the Emperor. So that's basically a custodian that's handed his badge in and feels like he's not as good as he used to be. But having like one custodies in the form of the Eyes of the Emperor with like a retinue of spies could be a really interesting infiltrating team for 40k, and a really interesting team for Kill Team as well. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. If you've got any ideas about the game of Kill Team, any ideas about what kind of teams you'd like to see released, what kind of factions you'd like to see shape the game, or even what kind of direction you'd like to see the kill zones go in, please drop it in the comments below. I'd love to have that conversation with you. Thanks for your time. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'm only a little baby YouTube channel at the moment, and every little helps. Cheers. Take care, guys.